Watch out, this episode contains spoilers for Transformers 1. This year, the new movie Transformers 1 told the story of how Megatron went from an ordinary robot labouring on the bottom rung of Cybertronian society to the tyrannical leader of the Decepticons. But this film is just the most recent exploration of Megatron's origins, so let's look at how it all began with the basics on D-16. The story of Megatron's early life has been told in multiple different ways over the course of the Transformers franchise's 40-year history, but one of the earliest and most significant stories to tell the origin of the Decepticon leader was State Games, a short prose story set in the world of the Marvel comic book, written by British author James Hill for the 1986 Transformers Annual published in the United Kingdom. State Games depicted the young Megatron as an athlete from the city of Tarn, who earned fame competing in a gladiatorial tournament organised by Cybertron's aging ruler, the Autobot Overlord. The power-hungry Megatron dreamed of conquering Cybertron and turning the planet into a massive mobile battle station that he would use to conquer other worlds and build a galaxy-spanning empire. And when a war broke out between Tarn and its rival city Voss, he saw his chance to make his dream a reality. In the chaos of the conflict, Megatron was thrown together with the Overlord, and when the weakened, energy-starved old bot requested that Megatron share some of his energy with him, Megatron refused and coldly watched as the Overlord ran out of power and died right in front of him. After the war ended soon after, Megatron rallied the embittered survivors of Voss and Tarn under his leadership by blaming the Autobot city of Iacon for not stepping in to end the fighting. Slowly, secretly, his new army, dubbed the Decepticons, grew in power, until the day Megatron finally declared war on the Autobots to take Cybertron for himself. By contrast, in the original Transformers animated series, Megatron wasn't the founder of the Decepticons, only their most recent leader. In the cartoon, the two factions had gone to war before Megatron was even created. The Autobots had won that war, leading to a golden age of peace on Cybertron. But when Megatron was born, he began the war again, with a series of strikes that took the life of the current Autobot leader and wounded a young bot named Orion Pax, who would survive to become the Autobots' new commander, Megatron's eternal enemy, Optimus Prime. Of these two classic origin stories, Marvel's portrayal of Megatron as a gladiator who founded the Decepticons has proven by far the most influential, with the idea carrying forward to many subsequent series. The first being Dreamwave Productions comic books in the early 2000s. In Dreamwave stories, Megatron used the gladiatorial games themselves to build his army, leveraging the fame he earned in the fights to attract like-minded bots to his cause, and testing prospective members in the arena, recruiting the best combatants to become the first Decepticons. This idea would in turn carry forward into IDW Publishing's 2007 comic, Megatron Origin, a mini-series that explored Megatron's early days in detail, and for the first time gave him a more complex motivation than a simple hunger for power and conquest. In IDW's universe, Megatron began life as an energon miner, part of Cybertron's downtrodden, underprivileged working class, until the Senate that ruled Cybertron chose to automate the mine in which he worked. Outraged at the upper class's obvious lack of regard for their welfare, the miners rioted, and during the brawl, Megatron accidentally killed a guard. For this, he was arrested, but escaped en route to prison, and with nowhere else to go, took refuge in the criminal underworld of the city of Kaon. There, Megatron made a name for himself fighting in illegal underground gladiatorial blood sports, and used this fame to build an army of his fellow mistreated lower-class bots, with the goal of tearing down the Senate and the upper classes who had oppressed them, and taking power for himself. But not every new story would use Marvel's ideas. The live-action film series in particular offered its own significantly different take on Megatron's backstory. In this world, before the war, he and Optimus Prime had been brothers in arms who had ruled Cybertron together. Tie-in media detailed how Megatron grew jealous when it came to light that Optimus was a descendant of the Primes, the legendary original Transformers from Cybertron's distant past. And that jealousy allowed him to be tempted to the side of evil by the Fallen, the outcast member of that ancient pantheon of Primes, who promised Megatron the power of a Prime if he served him. Turning on Optimus, Megatron raised an army for the Fallen that wore their new master's face as their insignia. In 2010, Hasbro launched the Aligned Continuity, a multimedia project made up of multiple interconnected series and storylines that pulled together ideas from all over Transformers history to build a unified modern vision for the franchise and its lore, including the origins of Megatron. As detailed in various sources, including the novel Exodus, the Transformers Prime cartoon, and the Covenant of Primus guidebook, the aligned incarnation of Megatron was born at a time of great inequality on Cybertron, when the planet operated under a caste system that locked bots into jobs and positions on the social hierarchy from the moment of their birth, based on what they transformed into. The robot who would become Megatron was a miner, born without a name. He was known only as D-16, after the sector of the mine where he worked. Though, in real life, the name was a reference to the ID number on the Japanese release of the original Megatron toy. Angered by the injustice of his world and seeking to be something more, D-16 took to fighting in underground gladiatorial matches. In these pits, he gave himself a new name drawn from Cybertronian legend, Megatronus, after the fallen member of the original Primes, the outcast who lashed out at those who shunned him, just as D-16 longed to do. But as his popularity in the arena grew, the chanting crowd shortened this name to just Megatron. Megatron used his newfound fame to speak out against Cybertron's unjust system, calling for it to be dismantled so that all Transformers could be equal, free to choose their own paths in life. He quickly amassed a legion of supporters, including an idealistic young file clerk named Orion Pax. Megatron and Orion became close friends, but disagreed over how best to achieve Megatron's goals. Orion thought the system could be peacefully reformed, but Megatron saw violent revolutionary action as the only way forward, and secretly was already ordering his followers to carry out acts of terrorism. In truth, Megatron's desire for self-determination had grown into the arrogant belief that he should rule Cybertron to lift it out of these dark times. But when Megatron and Orion appeared before Cybertron's High Council to have their say, it was Orion's words of peace that wound up inspiring the Council to appoint him the planet's new leader, Optimus Prime. Furious at what he saw as his friends' betrayal of their shared ideals, Megatron turned his back on Optimus, and with his followers, now named the Decepticons, and using Megatronus's face as their insignia, he declared war to take the power he believed should have been his. The Aligned story would go on to become the definitive modern take on Megatron's origins, and its broad strokes, Megatron as a bot from the lower classes, named after and inspired by the fallen Prime, who founded the Decepticons to bring equality to a corrupt Cybertron, and worked with the young Optimus Prime to achieve this goal until Megatron's violent extremism and emergent hunger for power drove the pair apart and sparked the war, have formed the basis of his depiction in essentially every major new series released since, each one putting its own spin on the same basic ideas. Even IDW's comics would incorporate the Aligned ideas back into their universe, in new stories that expanded on what had been seen in Megatron Origin to present one of the more fleshed out accounts of Megatron's descent into evil from well-intentioned beginnings. These tales emphasized the tragedy of his fall, painting him as a working-class intellectual twisted by the abuse he suffered at the hands of the system, which filled him with hate and showed him the power of violence to achieve his goals where words alone failed. IDW stories would also inspire several toys of the young Megatron, including two of him in his minor design, a small-scale one released in the Generations toy line in 2013, and a larger one in the Legacy line in 2023, and another Legacy figure representing Megatron during his Gladiator days, released in 2024. IDW would also offer one of the most different variations on the story when they rebooted their comics in 2019. In this universe, Megatron chose to work as a miner to help fuel Cybertron's colonization of other planets. But he grew bitter after ruler Nominus Prime halted the colonization program, robbing Megatron of his sense of purpose. Megatron's mentor, the scholar Termagax, founded a political party named the Decepticons to advocate for a repeal of Nominus's edict. But when her efforts failed, Megatron took over as the party's leader, convinced it was his destiny to bring back the old days of expansion and conquest. Seeing how Termagax had been unable to win her argument with words, Megatron was determined to force change through deception and violence. Secretly, he began orchestrating terror attacks to create a climate of fear on Cybertron, paving the way for his party, radicalized by his inflammatory rhetoric and now renamed the Decepticons, to tear down the government in a coup. Most recently, in 2024, Megatron's origin story came to the big screen in the movie Transformers 1. In this film's take on the tale, D-16 was one of a lower class of mining bots who lacked the ability to transform. In contrast to other stories, he believed in the system and in Cybertron's ruler, Sentinel Prime, and was always trying to keep his impulsive, rule-breaking best friend, fellow miner Orion Pax, out of trouble. But that all changed when the pair discovered Sentinel's dark secret. He was a pretender who had betrayed and killed the original Primes and usurped their rule. Sentinel had taken the transformation cog of D-16's hero, Megatronus Prime, for himself, and had created the minor underclass by extracting their cogs at birth to turn them into workers whose labour the upper classes could live off. Given new cogs by the ancient sage Alpha Trion, D-16 and Orion gathered an army of anti-Sentinel insurgents to take down his regime. But D-16 wouldn't stop there. Enraged to learn that the system he had believed in was built on a lie, he was insistent on killing Sentinel, and when Orion tried to stop him, D turned on his friend, dropping him to his apparent death in the depths of Cybertron. D-16 then tore Megatronus's cog from Sentinel's corpse and installed it in his own body. Renaming himself Megatron after his fallen hero, he declared himself the planet's new leader and called for the deaths of all who had followed Sentinel. But moments later, Orion returned, having been saved by the spirits of the Primes and dubbed their true successor, Optimus Prime. Defeated in battle by Optimus, Megatron and those loyal to him were exiled, but in time they would take the name Decepticons and declare war on Optimus's rule. Only time will tell if Transformers 1 stands a chance of becoming the new definitive take on Megatron's rise and fall that'll go on to shape the direction of future series like the aligned continuity before it. But regardless of where his story begins, whatever his original motives, his end goal will always inevitably be the same: destruction, domination, and peace through tyranny. And those are the basics on D-16 and the origins of Megatron. The Big Megs had some very different backstories. Let me know your favourite in the comments. As ever, if you've enjoyed this video, check out my channel for nearly 250 more about Transformers history and lore, plus get early ad-free access to new vids on Patreon.